Imagine standing right at the edge of something truly monumental. I mean, not just a big building, but a structure meant to last for centuries. A profound symbol, really, of an entire nation's faith, its purpose. What would it actually take to bring a vision like that to life? Beyond just the mountains of raw materials and the sheer physical labor of tens of thousands of people.
Yeah, it's an undertaking that demands so much more than just resources, doesn't it? It takes immense wisdom, real diplomatic skill, and maybe even, some unseen, powerful forces working silently in your favor, or maybe against you.
Yeah.
It's not just about the blueprints you can see or the money or even the workforce. It's profoundly about the vision itself, the careful orchestration of events, the subtle currents in international relations, and those spiritual dynamics that often shape or maybe hinder the biggest human projects.
Absolutely. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are immersing ourselves in, an extraordinary foundational chapter from ancient history, 1 Kings chapter 5. And look, this isn't just some dusty old account about cutting timber or quarrying stone, although, it does talk about those things. This deep dive is really a masterclass in ancient leadership. It's a fascinating study in complex international relations, and honestly, it's a surprising revelation of how decisions made thousands of years ago can echo through time, offering profound insights into your life today.
And our mission for this deep dive is exactly that, to pull out the crucial, often surprising nuggets of knowledge and insight from this key text. We'll carefully explore the intricate political chessboard of the ancient Near East. We'll try to uncover the profound spiritual dimensions unfolding behind the scenes, and ultimately reveal some really surprising parallels to leadership, governance, and even your own personal sense of purpose in the world today.
So by the end of this deep dive, you'll hopefully not only have a much deeper understanding of this key moment in history, but also why it holds such compelling relevance, why it still truly matters for you. Okay, let's unpack this. So we're zeroing in on 1 Kings chapter 5. And to really get its significance, we have to start by setting the stage. That means understanding the background, David's legacy, and this huge mandate passed on to his son Solomon. Now, a natural question comes up right away. David was Israel's great warrior king, a man after God's own heart. So why couldn't he build the temple? Why was he told no? What was the deeper reason there?
That's a really foundational question, isn't it? And it leads us straight to this remarkable insight about divine timing and, purpose. David, for all his power and his deep piety, he really wanted, it was a personal desire to build a glorious permanent temple for the Lord. He even started gathering materials for it. But the biblical story is clear. He was a man of constant warfare, always engaged in battle, securing borders, expanding the kingdom, literally building the kingdom through conflict. God explicitly told David, no, your son Solomon, he's the one who will accomplish this huge task to build a house for my name, God. And the reason given, it was because David had shed so much blood in all these campaigns.
Right. So this wasn't just like a simple generational handover, was it? It feels much more deliberate, almost strategically planned out. David's reign, it was marked by that necessary, maybe violent work of establishing the kingdom, forging its identity in, the heat of war. But Solomon coming to the throne after David had brought some level of security, it seems specifically set aside for a different phase, a phase of peace and consolidation. That feels like a very intentional shift in God's plan for Israel.
Precisely. It wasn't just passing the torch. David's time was just too turbulent, too focused on military conquest and securing those borders for such a huge, constructive national project. His whole focus had to be on subduing enemies and making this young kingdom strong. Solomon's rise, though, it ushers in a period that's explicitly called peace, or rest on every side, as the text says. And this peace, it's not just a political thing. It's presented as a direct gift from God. A prerequisite, really. It profoundly underscores how God orchestrates things, sometimes over generations, preparing the ground, you could say. The right person with the right gifts for Solomon, that was wisdom, and this mandate for peace emerges when the conditions, divinely prepared, are just right for the specific job. It really shows that sometimes the right person for a task, they only show up when the conditions are perfectly aligned, and often those conditions are way outside our control.
And Solomon, right when he takes the throne, he seems to get this profound reality immediately. He understands his divine job. He declares, and I find this phrasing just so striking, "Now the Lord my God has given me peace on every side. I have no enemies and all is well." Some translations go even further, saying, "Neither adversary nor evil occurrence," or even, quite literally, "no Satan." Now, this isn't just about political stability, right? It's not just no wars happening. It feels much, much bigger, deeper than that.
Well, it absolutely does. It's described as this profound period of widespread peace and prosperity, and it's directly called a divine blessing, specifically designed to make the temple construction possible. That specific wording, neither adversary nor evil occurrence or no Satan, that's incredibly significant from a spiritual viewpoint. What's fascinating is it points to a profound spiritual interaction, almost like a spiritual ceasefire. It suggests God is actively providing these highly favorable circumstances by, well, essentially removing spiritual opposition.
Wow, like God clearing the unseen battlefield before the first shovel hits the ground. What kind of spiritual opposition would you normally expect for something this big? Building a house for the Lord's name.
Well, think about what this project is. Building a dwelling place for the name of the Lord, a physical sign of God's presence among his people. Something like that would naturally be a prime target for intense spiritual resistance. The enemy, Satan, the adversary, the accuser in Scripture, would typically want to stop it, corrupt it, sow discord around such a key project. Imagine the ways opposition could show up. Maybe a sudden plague among the workers, political distrust sown between Israel and Tyre, sabotage, internal fights among the Israelites, maybe even other nations resisting a temple to Yahweh alone. Those are the kinds of things that often plague big projects, especially ones with divine purpose.
But Solomon explicitly says that's not happening. The whole process described is so smooth, so peaceful, it's almost suspiciously perfect. No internal strife, no external threats, no political sabotage mentioned at all.
Exactly. And that remarkably smooth, peaceful, cooperative process described here, it's presented as this powerful proof of God's protective hand, and also Solomon's faithfulness at this early, really crucial stage of his reign. It represents a profound spiritual victory of order and cooperation over chaos and division. And this implies, that when human leadership lines up with God's will, spiritual roadblocks can actually be temporarily removed or at least significantly reduced. This isn't just the absence of war. It's a divinely granted state of calm, politically and spiritually, that literally paves the way for these big constructive things.
It really makes you wonder, though, doesn't it? What happens when that peace, that spiritual peace, that absence of an adversary isn't there? How much harder do our own big projects get, whether it's personal stuff or national things, when there's an unseen spiritual force maybe actively working against them, trying to sow confusion, division, discouragement? I mean, can you imagine how much more could get done, say, here in America, if our Democrats, Republicans, independents could actually set aside the infighting and work together? The constant political gridlock often feels like something unseen actively working against progress, sowing division.
That's a really powerful thought. And if you connect this to the bigger biblical picture, this divinely granted rest for Solomon, it foreshadows the millennial reign of Christ, right? Where Satan will be bound for 1,000 years, bringing incredible peace. And it points even further to the ultimate eternal state where there will be no more adversary at all, just perfect harmony. Solomon's peace here is like a small sliver, a taste of the ultimate kingdom to come. Just like being born again gives a taste of new life, this moment in 1 Kings 5 is a glimpse of God's bigger renewal project for everything. It's profound type, a divine preview, showing God's consistent plan working out through history.
So this era of divinely granted peace, this cleared spiritual and political chessboard, it absolutely sets the stage for a crucial international alliance. An alliance which Solomon, with that God-given wisdom, immediately sees he needs. And this brings us to this fascinating character, King Hiram of Tyre. On the surface, he might seem like a bit of an unexpected partner for this new Israelite king, wouldn't he? A pagan ruler working closely with the builder of the Lord's temple.
Absolutely. And the text introduces him quite warmly, actually. Describes him as a loyal friend of David who immediately sends ambassadors to congratulate Solomon when he becomes king. Now, Tyre, for our listeners, wasn't just some small town. It was a powerful Phoenician city-state, a major player known throughout the ancient Near East. Imagine a bustling port city, a real hub of sea power and trade, famous for its incredibly skilled craftsmen, artisans, shipbuilders, carpenters, stonemasons, and most importantly for our story, its amazing cedar and cypress timber from the forests of Lebanon. Tyre was like the Silicon Valley of ancient engineering and resources.
And it's clear Solomon, in his wisdom, knew that Israel, while strong agriculturally, just didn't have the specific expertise needed for such a massive building project. He saw a critical national gap in skills, explicitly telling Hiram, "There is no one among us who can cut timbers like you, Sidonians." That's a pretty remarkable admission of need from a powerful king.
It really is.
Yeah.
It says a lot about Solomon's wisdom and maybe his humility at this point. This wasn't just some cold business deal starting from zero. It was built on existing trust, a relationship forged between David and Hiram, and now this new foundation of mutual respect. Solomon was wise enough to see his own kingdom's limits, especially in sophisticated logging and quarrying, and to openly ask for help. And Hiram's reaction is also quite telling. The sources say he was genuinely delighted, and he exclaims, "Praise the Lord for giving David a wise son to be king of the great nation of Israel." He gives credit for Solomon's wisdom directly to the Lord.
Wow, that's not just diplomatic fluff, is it? It feels incredibly significant that a Gentile king, someone outside Israel's covenant, acknowledges the Lord's wisdom in Solomon and praises God for it. What does that tell us about God's broader influence, maybe?
That's a vital point. Speaking to a deep theological idea, it really does suggest a deeper divine influence at work, actively encouraging this unlikely but strategic alliance between two different nations. Hiram's immediate enthusiastic, "Blessed be the Lord this day," right after hearing Solomon's proposal, is a key sign of this. It shows God's power reaching even into the hearts and minds of kings who weren't part of Israel's faith. It implies a divine reach that goes beyond culture and religion, directly influencing political decisions, creating these remarkably favorable conditions for his will to happen. It's like God strategically moving pieces, leaders, and nations on a global chessboard for this specific project.
So it's a truly strategic partnership then, bringing very different national strengths together for a common goal. Solomon's request is super specific. He needs cedars from Lebanon, famous for their strength, beauty, aroma. And Hiram, always the practical, savvy leader, agrees. He offers not just cedar, but also cypress, another valuable wood. And he lays out the logistics in detail. "My men will bring logs down from Lebanon to the sea, make them into rafts, float them where you say, then break them up for you to take away. It's an ancient, complex supply chain, all planned out."
And in return, Hiram, the shrewd businessman, just asks for food for my household, which basically means provisions for his palace and his workers. But Solomon's annual payment, if the details come out in the sources, shows the huge scale of this deal. Somewhere between 100,000 to 125,000 bushels of wheat and an incredible 110,000 to 115,000 gallons of virgin olive oil every single year. This wasn't a one-off payment. It was like a subscription paid year by year, an ongoing trade agreement for however long the project took.
Whoa. Those are not small numbers. Just to give our listeners a sense, 100,000 bushels of wheat. That's enough to feed tens of thousands for a year. 110,000 gallons of oil. That's like what, over 16 Olympic pools worth? These are huge annual payments, a massive transfer of agricultural wealth for specialized materials and labor. It really is a masterclass in mutually beneficial international trade and managing resources strategically.
Absolutely. Israel, rich in agriculture, having a food surplus, used that surplus to get specialized materials and amazing skills from Tyre, which was this commercial seafaring empire, rich in timber and craftsmanship, but not so much in food production. This symbiotic relationship didn't just get the crucial resources, it also created jobs and purpose for people in both nations, kind of countering that devil's workshop idea of idle hands. It paints this vivid picture of perfectly complementary partnership, showing how different national strengths and weaknesses can be combined for a shared, really ambitious goal. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, it parallels modern global cooperation, right? Like international climate agreements or complex trade deals like NAFTA or the EU's common market, where nations rely on each other's resources, industry, expertise for shared goals. It's a timeless principle, leveraging comparative advantages.
Okay, so with the raw materials secured through this sophisticated trade deal, the focus naturally shifts to the maybe even more complex challenge: organizing the sheer number of people needed for a project this big. And this is where the numbers get even more mind-boggling, really showing the incredible scale of Solomon's administrative skill.
Solomon mobilizes a truly staggering workforce. The sources mention 30,000 Israelites conscripted specifically to work in Lebanon cutting timber. But crucially, not all at the same time. There was this meticulous system. They were sent in rotational shifts. 10,000 men per month. They'd work 1 month up in Lebanon doing that demanding labor, and then they'd get 2 months back home. Time to rest, tend their own fields, be with their families. A specific guy, Adoniram, was put in charge of this particular labor force, overseeing this massive, complex rotation, making sure it ran smoothly.
Okay, so 30,000 rotating just for the timber. But that's surely not the whole workforce, is it? I mean, we're talking about building a structure intended to be one of the wonders of the ancient world.
No, not even close. On top of those 30,000, the sources detail another 70,000 common laborers or burden bearers. These were mostly unskilled workers, hauling materials, maybe quarrying the rougher stone, preparing sites, and then another 80,000 skilled stonecutters, all enlisted from within Israel and probably its conquered territories. So that's another 150,000 people right there doing the heavy lifting and the precise stonework. And these 150,000 were overseen by an additional 3,300 to 3,600 foremen or supervisors appointed by Solomon. That points to a really detailed multi-level management structure, plus men from Jabal, another Phoenician city known for highly skilled stonework. They also helped out, likely brought in for their specialized masonry skills. Another layer showing Solomon knew he needed niche expertise.
And they weren't just cutting any old stone. The text says they were quarrying huge blocks of the best stone, dressed stone for the foundation. Immense, precisely cut stones for the very base of the temple. Just try to imagine the raw engineering feat, quarrying, shaping, moving multi-ton blocks of stone over distances without any modern machinery. This wasn't just brute force, it was serious ancient engineering. The scale is almost impossible to fully picture today.
It immediately shows the huge scope of the project, and honestly, Solomon's incredibly sophisticated administrative abilities, that rotational labor system for the Israelites in Lebanon, sending them in shifts, that's particularly interesting. It was designed to keep morale up and make it sustainable long-term.
That rotation system sounds remarkably, well, progressive for an ancient king. Why is that so significant?
It shows a degree of what modern leadership theory might call individualized consideration. It's a practical way to lessen hardship and prevent total burnout. It reflects a leader's concern for his people's well-being, at least on some level, while still making sure work continued on this demanding long project. However, and there's always a however with ancient labor, right? It also highlights the massive centralization of government power and the direct, undeniable impact of its policies on ordinary citizens' lives.
Right, because even if it's rotational and for a holy purpose, it's still conscripted labor to some extent. A huge top-down mobilization.
Exactly. While this huge mobilization was for a divinely ordered project building God's house and seemingly done with some thought for the workers, it subtly hints at potential future social problems. Think about the psychological impact. On one hand, probably a profound sense of national pride and unity. They were literally building the house of God, contributing to the most important divine project in their nation's history. That must have been incredibly powerful for many, creating a shared identity and purpose.
A truly unifying national project, for a time anyway.
But on the other hand, there's the very real physical burden and the potential for grumbling that comes with such widespread conscripted labor, even if rotational and for a sacred goal. The sheer scale meant it affected countless families, their farms, their livelihoods. The text implies a balance where hardship was lessened, but history shows again and again how this kind of large-scale conscription, even for noble aims, can lead to discontent, rebellion, and social division later on. This clearly foreshadows events later in 1 Kings chapter 12, for example, where Solomon's son, Rehoboam, faces a massive rebellion, largely fueled by anger over the very labor policies his father started. This foundational demand on the people, while maybe accepted at first, laid the groundwork for future trouble.
So the very way Solomon organized this workforce, its massive scale and intricate management, it says so much about his leadership, both the impressive parts and the potentially problematic aspects. It forces us to think about that timeless line between mobilizing for the national good and potential exploitation. It raises ethical questions that are incredibly relevant today, right? Discussions about fair labor, worker rights, social responsibility in government and business. You see echoes of this maybe in the gig economy, efficiency and flexibility gained, but often at the cost of worker security, or in debates about migrant workers, where large labor forces are drawn for big projects, raising questions about fairness and long-term impact.
Indeed. It really was impressive leadership in many ways. And Solomon's actions in 1 Kings 5 showcase his God-given wisdom and practical governance. He shows incredible diplomatic skill with Hiram, acknowledging Israel's limits and Tyre's strengths, proposing that genuinely win-win partnership, and organizing that huge labor force, all those hundreds of thousands. From skilled loggers in Lebanon to burden bearers and stone cutters, it reflects meticulous planning, smart resource management, and effective delegation on a scale probably unmatched at the time. He's not just giving orders, he's designing this whole complex system.
Solomon really exemplifies transformational leadership here, at least in this early phase. He gives this inspiring national vision building the temple. He sets incredibly high standards for quality, the best stone, the best cedars, and he communicates this strong sense of optimism and shared purpose that even resonates with Hiram, the foreign king, getting their enthusiastic help.
And this effective political maneuvering, this administrative skill, it's explicitly presented in the text as a direct gift from God. It allows him to create national stability and achieve these incredibly ambitious goals. When you think about those specific numbers, again, 30,000 Israelites rotating, 70,000 burden bearers, 80,000 stone cutters, those 3,300 or 3,600 foremen, these aren't just abstract figures. They represent a complex, highly organized project management feat, probably unparalleled for its time. It required a truly genius-level mind to coordinate it all effectively. Solomon's ability to inspire and sustain such a massive collective effort for one single long-term national goal is a testament to both his divine gift and his innate leadership qualities.
Okay, it's clear that while the practical side of this massive construction project is just astounding, there's also this deeper, unseen dimension profoundly at play here. This isn't just a story about kings and workers. There seem to be spiritual forces at work, or maybe more importantly, not at work.
Indeed. Let's circle back to that really crucial phrase from 1 Kings 5.4, where Solomon says, "The Lord my God has given me rest on every side. There is neither adversary nor evil occurrence." Spiritually, this can be interpreted, and many theologians do see it this way, as a period free from significant demonic opposition or obstacles blocking God's work, truly like a spiritual ceasefire. It strongly suggests God's favor temporarily minimized spiritual resistance to the temple's construction, almost as if an unseen spiritual battle had been won, or at least put on hold, before the first stone was even cut, where the first tree fell.
So the enemy, often called Satan, the adversary, the accuser in Scripture, who would typically want to stop or mess up such a key project, they'd usually try to sow discord between Israel and Tyre, maybe, or corrupt the motives behind building the temple. Those would be typical tactics, right? What are some ways we see spiritual adversaries trying to block God's plans in other Bible stories, ways that we don't see happening here?
That's a great question. It really highlights the contrast. In other Bible stories, you see outright demonic oppression, you see lies spread by false spirits, or supernatural events designed to cause chaos and disunity. For instance, in Numbers, Balaam is hired specifically to curse Israel. That's clear spiritual warfare. Or later, prophets like Elijah directly confront the prophets of Baal in a spiritual showdown. If the adversary had been active here, maybe we would have seen plagues hit the workers, sudden famines to disrupt the food supply, or even direct political schemes, Hiram suddenly changing his mind. An assassination attempt on Solomon, a revolt by a conquered people. But the whole point here seems to be that it didn't happen. The text stresses the overwhelming peace. God cleared the way, spiritually and physically, for the temple to be built. It powerfully highlights God's supreme ability to set up the conditions for his will. The smooth, cooperative process is presented as powerful proof of God's protective hand and Solomon's faithfulness at this early, crucial stage. It represents a profound spiritual victory. Order and cooperation winning out over chaos and division.
And this divine peace is completely tied to God's active involvement, isn't it? The chapter clearly says, the Lord gave great wisdom to Solomon, just as he had promised. And it's not just Solomon who sees this divine hand. Even Hiram, the Gentile king of Tyre, blesses the Lord for giving David such a wise son. It's almost like God's influence went beyond Israel's borders, right into the politics and maybe even the spiritual atmosphere of foreign nations.
That's a vital observation. It underlines a deep theological point. God's sovereignty, his incredible ability to work not just through his chosen people, Israel, but also through those outside that covenant, like Hiram, the king of what was essentially a pagan nation to the Israelites. It vividly shows how God can directly influence leaders, give them wisdom, shape their hearts, create remarkably favorable conditions, and thereby guide political decisions, even complex international alliances, towards his divine purposes. Hiram's immediate enthusiastic, "Blessed be the Lord this day," right after hearing Solomon's plan, is a key sign of this divine influence. It shows God's power reaching even into the hearts and minds of kings, not explicitly aligned with Israel's faith. It illustrates that God's plan isn't confined to just one people or nation. It's like God strategically placing leaders and nations on a global chessboard for this specific project.
It truly is a powerful picture of God's hand in human affairs, guiding things even through unexpected people and places. But while everything seems so smooth and divinely orchestrated, almost miraculously smooth, there's still maybe an implicit challenge, perhaps a subtle tension hitting in this story, isn't there? A hint of vulnerability that comes out later.
Yes, absolutely. The temple's whole purpose is to be a house for the name of the Lord. It's a central spiritual statement, a symbol of God's unique sovereignty to all nations. Yet Tyre, this powerful and necessary ally, was notoriously a center of idolatry, a hub of pagan worship, especially deities like Baal and Asherah. This raises a critical, subtle point. While it's not shown as conflict or negative influence in this chapter, the broader story in the books of Kings shows how easily kings, even divinely blessed ones like Solomon, can be negatively influenced, leading eventually to disobedience and spiritual decline.
And Solomon himself, later in his reign, famously turned to other gods. He allowed pagan worship inside Israel, partly influenced by his many foreign wives, some of whom were likely from these very Phoenician cultures, given his close alliance with Hiram and how those ancient treaties often worked. So the very source of strength for building the temple becomes a source of later weakness.
Exactly. So while God clearly overcame the external spiritual resistance for the temple's initial construction, this very partnership, though initially beneficial and divinely enabled, subtly plants the seeds of future spiritual compromise. The close ties, the cultural exchange, the intermarriage that often came with such alliances, these created vulnerabilities. The smooth success of these early stages can be seen as God's power overcoming external obstacles. But the seeds of future problems like these alliances with pagan nations, and maybe even the long-term social effects of the conscripted labor, they hint at how even divinely blessed projects, if not continually guarded with spiritual vigilance, can become vulnerable to negative influences or human failings that eventually lead to spiritual compromise.
It's a profound contrast, isn't it? The immense peace and lack of adversary in chapter 5 highlight God's power to clear the way externally. Yet Solomon's later moral failures, described so starkly in 1 Kings 11 where he built shrines for foreign gods, it underscores the ongoing spiritual battle that can happen inside a leader even when external enemies seem quiet. The real threat can shift from outside to inside.
Precisely. The potential for demonic influence, or maybe just human weakness and compromise, though it's only implicit here, is a constant subtle threat to even the most righteous projects. This challenges us, to consider if our own lives, our own endeavors, are built on a foundation of wisdom, partnered well with others, and for a purpose greater than ourselves, all while staying constantly vigilant. It shows that God can clear external paths and give incredible opportunities, but internal vigilance, personal faithfulness, resisting those subtle pulls of worldly influence, those remain absolutely crucial. It's a powerful warning wrapped inside a story of incredible triumph and divine help, revealing that even God's chosen people aren't immune to temptation and compromise without continuously staying aligned.
This chapter, even though it's ancient, it truly offers such lasting principles for today. It reaches way beyond just bricks and mortar, doesn't it? It has profound lessons for us, not just as history, but as a living text.
Absolutely. The temple itself is probably the most significant allegorical and typological parallel in this chapter. Think of it not just as an old building, but as a blueprint, a profound preview of something much grander, what theologians call a typological parallel. It's a living symbol, a type pointing towards the church today. Just as that physical temple in Jerusalem was the literal place where God's presence lived among his people, the church, as described in the New Testament, is now seen as God's spiritual dwelling place on earth, made up of living stones, as 1 Peter 2.5 puts it so beautifully. This whole story also parallels Jesus himself. He's both the ultimate temple, the true meeting place between God and humanity, and he's the master builder of this ongoing spiritual temple.
Like in John chapter 2, where Jesus talks about destroying the temple and raising it in 3 days, and John clarifies he was talking about his body as the temple. That's a direct link, right? His own identity as the ultimate place God dwells.
Exactly that passage. It explicitly shows Jesus referring to his body as the temple, foreshadowing its destruction and resurrection, and thereby shifting God's primary presence from a physical building to a living person. And it's also fascinating how Solomon himself, often seen as Israel's Prince of Peace in this early period, his very name Shalomo comes from shalom, meaning peace. He so clearly foreshadows Jesus, the true Prince of Peace, who brings ultimate reconciliation, profound wisdom, and lasting peace to humanity. He's the one who truly binds Satan and brings in that eternal age of no adversary.
And what about including Gentiles like Hiram and the Sidonians in building the temple? That seems incredibly important too, moving beyond just an exclusive covenant people.
Incredibly significant, including Gentiles, people from outside the covenant nation of Israel. And the temple's construction powerfully foreshadows the later inclusion of all nations, all peoples, in God's new covenant in the global church. Paul talks about this extensively in Ephesians, explaining how through Christ, Gentiles are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and members of God's household, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ Jesus himself as the chief cornerstone. This historical moment in 1 Kings 5 gives us a biblical precedent, a glimpse of God's consistent plan through history to invite all peoples into his presence, really shattering any narrow nationalistic view of salvation. And those huge blocks of the best stone, those costly stones, quarried for the physical temple's foundation. They serve as a rich metaphor for a solid spiritual foundation. Christ himself is the chosen and precious stone upon whom the church is built, as 1 Peter 2:6 says. This emphasizes laying a firm foundation in your own faith, often out of the sight of men, in quiet foundational spiritual work, built on the solid rock of Christ.
This whole section gives such rich theological insights, offering these profound aha moments by connecting these historical details from 1 Kings to the core ideas of Christian faith. It shows God's consistent plan unfolding across all of history, and that God's original intention was always much broader than just one nation. Yet the beauty of 1 Kings chapter 5 is that while these themes weave together across multiple dimensions, it creates this rich tapestry of meaning. Let's maybe explore how the spiritual, mental, psychological, theological, and social aspects of this story don't just exist side by side, but dynamically influence each other.
Okay, so starting with the spiritual dimension, we've talked about that spiritual ceasefire and God removing adversaries. How does that spiritual piece directly impact the other dimensions of this whole project?
Spiritually, the chapter really underscores the profound significance of the temple as this physical representation of God's presence among his people, like a beacon to the nations. Solomon's dedication shows a deep spiritual commitment, and the peace he has is presented as a direct, undeniable divine blessing. The absence of adversary or evil occurrence suggests this period of spiritual protection, allowing God's work to move forward without hindrance. This spiritual calm, this divinely granted state of grace, it directly enabled Solomon's mental and psychological abilities to function without the constant stress of external threats or internal spiritual warfare. It implied that when humanity, through its leaders, aligns with God's will, spiritual roadblocks can indeed be removed or lessened, creating the best conditions for constructive work.
That spiritual calm must have had a huge effect on Solomon's state of mind, his ability to lead. So connecting that to the mental and psychological dimensions, what does this chapter tell us about Solomon's unique genius in these areas?
Well, Solomon's mental sharpness is incredibly clear in his strategic thinking. His complex logistical planning, his masterful diplomatic communication, his ability to envision such a massive project and then motivate and organize that vast workforce. It really speaks to strong psychological leadership, a unique kind of genius for project management. Mentally, it's truly a blueprint for effective project management in any era. Sourcing materials meticulously, managing large, diverse teams, emphasizing foresight, organization, effective delegation. Psychologically, think about the humility and wisdom it took for Solomon to admit Israel's limits and seek outside help. There's no one among us who can cut timbers like you, Sidonians. That willingness to ask for help without ego, that's a powerful mental lesson. Plus, Hiram's joy when he hears Solomon's vision shows the profound psychological impact of clear communication and a shared, inspiring goal. Solomon's leadership created a positive psychological
implications of the story. How does this chapter affirm God's character and his ongoing work throughout history?
Theologically, the chapter is deeply affirming of God's faithfulness. He fulfilled his promises, especially the one to David about building the temple. It highlights God as the ultimate source of wisdom and peace, which are shown as essential prerequisites for human flourishing and accomplishing divine purposes. It reinforces the idea of human agency working with divine will. Solomon's practical efforts and strategic choices are explicitly blessed and enabled by God. Building the temple is an act of worship, reflecting Solomon's dedication to honoring God's name and making a place for his presence. Theologically, it also broadens our understanding of God's sovereignty. It shows his consistent plan unfolding across history and how his original intention was always bigger than just one nation, including even Gentile leaders and nations in his big redemptive story.
Okay, finally, let's turn to the social implications. This was a massive project that touched every level of Israelite society, and Phoenician society too. What does this chapter show us about the dynamics of ancient society and how leadership impacted it?
Socially, 1 Kings 5 depicts a highly organized society capable of immense collective effort for a national goal. The conscription of labor, while common back then, starkly shows a centralized government's power to mobilize its people for national objectives. The economic exchange between Israel and Tyre illustrates early forms of large-scale international trade, mutual dependence, and leveraging specialized resources. The chapter portrays a society where social hierarchies and specialized labor, from timber cutters to burden bearers to stone cutters, are clearly defined and coordinated to achieve a common goal. It's a powerful example of how a leader's good decisions, combined with divine blessing and an overarching purpose, can bring about huge prosperity, security, and social unity for the people, provided the core motivation stays pure and just. However, as we talked about, it also subtly reveals the potential for future social strains coming from such large-scale conscription, hinting at how even divinely blessed projects can, over time, put significant burdens on the people that can lead to discontent if not managed with lasting wisdom and compassion. #tag practical lessons for modern life and leadership.
So this multidimensional analysis, it really translates into very practical lessons for our lives today, reaching far beyond just ancient history. Looking back at Solomon's approach, his mental sharpness, strategic thinking, masterful diplomacy, it's quite something.
His ability to envision such a huge project and then motivate and organize that vast workforce truly speaks to strong, effective psychological leadership, a unique kind of genius for project management. Mentally, it really is a blueprint for effective project management in any time. It emphasizes foresight, careful organization, effective delegation, all critical for tackling complex goals. Think about how this applies to your own projects, right? Whether you're tackling something big at work, coordinating a community thing, or even just setting personal goals, the need for careful foresight, efficient resource allocation, and humbly admitting your limits, it's absolutely timeless, isn't it? It really challenges us to maybe pause and assess our own capabilities and resources and the outside help we might need before just jumping headfirst into something big.
So the lessons here go beyond just individual project management. Solomon's recognition of his limits and his willingness to work with Hiram, an outside expert, it underscores this powerful principle of collaboration and networking.
Absolutely. In today's complex world, this translates directly to the immense value of teamwork across disciplines. Outsourcing specialized tasks to those who are best at them, and valuing diverse expertise in personal and professional life. No one person or group has all the knowledge or resources needed for truly ambitious goals.
Yeah.
Solomon's example encourages us to seek complementary partnerships, even with those who might seem culturally or ideologically different, if their strengths align with a shared constructive purpose.
And the chapter vividly shows how peace and stability are fundamental prerequisites for any major constructive work. Solomon specifically says he had neither adversary nor evil occurrence.
This highlights the critical importance of resolving conflict, diplomacy, and maintaining harmonious relationships. Whether it's internationally, within a community, a business, or even a family, achieving significant goals becomes profoundly harder without a foundation of peace. Imagine trying to innovate or build something new in an environment just riddled with internal fighting or external threats. The chapter reminds us that sometimes the most productive times are those where unseen forces of division are minimized, allowing for unity of purpose.
Finally, Solomon's dedication to building the temple for the name of the Lord provides a powerful model for honoring a higher purpose.
Indeed. For individuals today, this can mean dedicating time, talent, resources to spiritual goals, charity, community initiatives that go beyond just personal gain. For leaders, it challenges them to consider if their decisions truly serve a purpose greater than themselves or their immediate interests. Solomon's transformational leadership, articulating that inspiring vision, challenging followers with high standards, communicating optimism provides a timeless framework. It forces us to ask, are modern governments and leaders truly guided by principles that promote justice, wisdom, and a higher unifying purpose for their people? Or are they sometimes swayed by less noble, maybe unseen influences? What forces are really at play behind the scenes of our own biggest projects today? #tag
So we've journeyed deep into 1 Kings chapter 5. We've seen how Solomon's God-given wisdom, a period of divinely arranged peace, and these strategic, complementary alliances laid the very foundation for that magnificent temple. We explored the intricate layers of political, spiritual, and social dynamics, all interacting, recognizing both God's clear orchestration and those subtle undercurrents of potential opposition or future compromise, even in times of apparent peace.
So what does this ancient story, this deep dive, ultimately mean for you in your modern life? If the ancient temple foreshadows the church, and Christ himself is actively building his spiritual house with living stones, people like us, what unique part do you play in that grand, ongoing project today? How can you, right where you are, in your own sphere of influence, your family, your community, your workplace, your personal goals, how can you seek wisdom with the same intentionality Solomon sought it? How can you foster peace even when things are challenging? How can you build unifying alliances that use diverse strengths for a common good and dedicate your efforts to a purpose far greater than yourself?
And maybe most importantly, how can you ensure that your endeavors are truly aligned with God's glory? Built on a foundation of wisdom and integrity, and not swayed by those unseen forces, internal or external, that constantly seek to divide, corrupt, or derail noble intentions. That's something for you to really mull over long after this deep dive concludes.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep being well informed.